They say the truth always comes out, but Rasheeda never expected it to happen like this. One moment she was confident, composed, and certain that the worst was behind her. The next, her entire world collapsed. Not because of rumors, not because of accusations, but because of proof. Hidden camera footage captured, without her knowledge aired for the world to see. And in that footage was something she could never have imagined. Betrayal unfolding in real time, lies being spoken behind her back, and the shocking reality of what had been happening when she wasn't around. The footage left the cast speechless, fans in disbelief, and Rasheeda in tears. Her reaction wasn't scripted. It wasn't staged. It was raw, real, and heartbreaking. The kind of pain that comes when the person you trusted most becomes the one who breaks you the deepest. The air inside the studio was heavy, charged with tension and anticipation. Everyone knew the reunion episode of Love and Hip Hop Atlanta would be intense. But no one, not even Rasheeda, was prepared for what was about to happen. The producers had teased a special surprise, something that would change everything. But behind those cryptic words was a truth so devastating that it would shatter her world in a way no betrayal ever had before. Rasheeda arrived that day, determined to keep her composure. The last few months had been brutal. The accusations, the scandals, the endless rumors about Kirk's behavior behind closed doors. But she had survived worse. She told herself she could handle whatever the show threw at her. She had no idea that this time, the pain was coming not from gossip, but from undeniable proof. As the cast settled onto the couch under the bright studio lights, Mona, the host, began with her usual questions. The conversation started off tense, but manageable heated words between castmates. Few dramatic confessions, nothing Rasheeda hadn't heard before. Then, just as she was beginning to relax, Mona's tone shifted. "Before we continue," she said, looking directly at Rasheeda, "the production team has something we think you need to see." The room fell silent. Rasheeda's brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" she asked, glancing nervously around the stage. "We recently obtained some footage," Mona explained carefully. "It was recorded without your knowledge, and we think it's important you see it." Rasheeda's heart started pounding. "Footage? What kind of footage?" Mona didn't answer. Instead, she turned toward the massive LED screen behind them. The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the room. What appeared next would change everything. The video was grainy, but clear enough. It was from a hidden camera, placed in a private lounge area, at a recent industry event, one Rasheeda hadn't attended. The footage showed Kirk. At first, he was just talking with a group of people. Nothing unusual. But then, as the minutes passed, his behavior changed. He leaned in closer to a woman next to him. Not Jasmine, not anyone Rasheeda recognized, and began speaking in hushed tones. "Man, she has no idea," Kirk said, laughing under his breath. "She really thinks we're solid." The room gasped. Rasheeda's breath caught in her throat. The footage continued. Kirk took a sip of his drink and kept talking. "I've been moving money around for months. She never checks the accounts. And if she does, I've got explanations ready. I've been doing this for years." Rasheeda's hands flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she whispered. But it didn't stop there. Another clip appeared. This time Kirk, in the same lounge a few hours later. The woman from before was now sitting on his lap, and they were kissing deeply, intimately. And just when it seemed it couldn't get worse, he pulled back and said something that broke Rasheeda completely. "She's never leaving. She'll cry, she'll scream, but she'll stay. She always does." The words echoed in Rasheeda's mind like a sledgehammer. She'll stay. That was how he saw her. Not as a partner, not as a woman, but as someone too weak to walk away. It wasn't just betrayal. It was disrespect on a level she had never experienced before. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not yet. The room was silent. No one dared speak. Even the cast members, who had clashed with Rasheeda in the past, sat frozen, shocked by what they had just witnessed. "Rasheeda," Mona began softly, but Rasheeda held up a hand to stop her. She needed a moment. Her body felt numb, her chest tight, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear anything else. The betrayal was one thing. She had survived that before. But the humiliation of hearing those words, the proof that Kirk didn't just cheat, but mocked her behind her back, was unbearable. "Is this real?" she asked finally, her voice trembling. "Yes," Mona said gently. "We verified it. The footage was recorded last month." The tears she had been holding back finally fell. She buried her face in her hands as the weight of everything crashed down on her. "Rasheeda," he started, his voice trembling. "I know you're hurt, and you have every right to be, but please let me explain." "No," she interrupted, her voice sharp, but controlled. "I don't want your explanations. I watched the video. I heard every word. You laughed about betraying me. You bragged about lying to me. And you mocked me. There's nothing you can say that will erase that, babe. I was drunk. Stop." She raised a hand, cutting them off. "Drunk words are sober thoughts. And you said exactly how you feel. You think I'll always stay. You think I'm too weak to leave. You think I'll cry and scream, but never walk away. Well, you're wrong." Kirk swallowed hard. "I made a mistake." "No, Kirk," she said, her voice breaking. "A mistake is forgetting to take the trash out. What you did was a choice. You chose to disrespect me. You chose to humiliate me. You chose to cheat. And then you chose to brag about it like it was a joke." Tears streamed down her cheeks, but her voice didn't waver. "And I'm choosing right now to stop being your doormat." The room was silent. Kirk looked like he had been punched in the chest. "Are you saying?" "Yes," she said. "I'm done. This marriage is over." Gasps rippled through the room. Even the cast members, who had seen their fair share of drama, weren't prepared for this moment. "Rasheeda, please," Kirk begged, taking a step toward her. "I can change. I'll go to therapy. I'll do anything." "Too late," she said firmly. "You don't get to break someone over and over and then decide when they've had enough." "I've had enough." With that, she stood up, removed her wedding ring, and placed it on the table. The gesture was simple but powerful, a silent declaration that she was taking her life back. The aftermath was explosive. Within hours of the taping, news spread like wildfire. Rasheeda files for divorce after shocking footage. Social media erupted with support. Women shared their own stories of betrayal, praising her for choosing herself. The narrative shifted from humiliation to empowerment. But for Kirk, the fallout was brutal. His reputation, already damaged, was now in free fall. Business partners pulled out of deals. Fans boycotted his events, and the woman in the footage, she disappeared, leaving him to face the storm alone. Meanwhile, Rasheeda began rebuilding. She threw herself into her work, launching new projects, focusing on her children, and rediscovering who she was outside of the marriage. The pain was still there. It was no longer controlling her. And every time she heard Kirk's words replay in her mind, she'd cry. She screamed, but she smiled. Because now she knew the truth. She wouldn't stay. Not anymore. The moment Rasheeda placed her wedding ring on the table, the atmosphere shifted. This wasn't reality TV anymore. This was real life unraveling before millions of eyes. The woman who had once been mocked for always staying was finally walking away. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't for ratings. It was a raw, irreversible choice, born from years of betrayal, humiliation, and heartbreak. Kirk stood frozen, staring at the ring as if it were a symbol of everything he had just lost. His wife, his family, his legacy. For the first time in his life, words failed him. He wanted to beg, to argue, to plead his case, but deep down, he knew it was over. He had crossed a line there was no coming back from. The weeks following the reunion were a whirlwind. News of Rasheeda's decision dominated headlines and social media. Fans applauded her strength, Women around the world posted messages of support, sharing their own stories, and calling Rasheeda an inspiration. But behind the public applause was a private struggle, one that few people ever saw. Rasheeda had left Kirk, but leaving didn't mean the pain was gone. At night, when the cameras were off and the house was quiet, the weight of everything she'd lost crashed over her like a wave. She cried not because she regretted her decision, but because she was mourning the version of her life she thought she had. The love she believed was real, the trust she believed was unbreakable, the future she had imagined. And yet, every time she questioned whether she was doing the right thing, she remembered those words. She'd cry, she screamed, but she stayed. That memory alone reminded her why she wouldn't go back. A few days later, she met Yandi and Carly for brunch, the first real outing she'd had since the breakup. "Girl, the internet is calling you the Queen of Strength," Carly said with a smile. "You're trending everywhere." Rasheeda chuckled weakly. "Strength? That's funny. I don't feel strong. I feel numb." "You are strong," Yandi said. "You walked away from a situation that was killing your spirit. That's not weakness. That's power." Rasheeda sighed, stirring her coffee absent-mindedly. "I just keep asking myself, how did I get here? How did I become the woman who allowed herself to be treated like that for so long?" Carly reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Because you loved him, and there's nothing weak about loving someone. The weakness is on the person who takes that love for granted." Her friend's words helped, right? But the road ahead was still daunting. Ending a marriage wasn't as simple as walking away. There were legal documents to sign, businesses to untangle, assets to divide, and most importantly, children to protect. Kirk had been a terrible husband, but he was still their father. And despite everything, Rasheeda didn't want to poison that relationship. Still, the thought of dealing with him made her sick. 2 weeks after the reunion, Kirk requested a private meeting. Against her better judgment, Rasheeda agreed. She wanted closure, and maybe, just maybe, she wanted to hear him admit the truth to her face. They met at a quiet cafe in Atlanta, far from the paparazzi and cameras. When Kirk walked in, he looked like a shell of himself. His clothes were wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot, confidence gone. "Thank you for meeting me," he said softly. "Don't thank me," she replied coldly. "Say what you came to say." "I don't know where to start," he admitted, his voice shaking. "I messed up. I hurt you in ways I can't even begin to understand, and I hate myself for it." Rasheeda stared at him for a long moment. "Do you even know why I'm done, Kirk?" "Because I cheated," he asked almost hopefully. "No," she said firmly. "It's not the cheating. It's not even the lying. It's what you said in that video. That's what ended us." Double quotes. Kirk lowered his head. He knew exactly what she meant. "You didn't just betray me," she continued. "You mocked me. You laughed about how I'd never leave. You made me feel like a fool, like my loyalty was a weakness instead of a choice. And that's something I can't forgive." Tears streamed down Kirk's face. "I was angry. I was drunk. No." Rasheeda interrupted. "You are honest. Maybe for the first time in your life, you were completely honest. And now I see you clearly." Kirk reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I just hope someday you'll understand that I never stopped loving you." "Love isn't enough," Rasheeda said quietly. "Not anymore." She stood up, leaving a few bills on the table for her coffee. As she walked toward the door, Kirk called after her one last time. "Is this really it?" She paused, turned back to look at him, and nodded. "This is it." Back home, Rasheeda felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness, relief, and something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. The meeting Rasheeda, on the other hand, was thriving. She had taken complete control of their businesses, rebranding them under her own name. Sales skyrocketed, not in spite of the scandal, but because of it. People respected her strength, admired her resilience, and wanted to support a woman who had turned betrayal into power. But even with all her success, there was one thing Rasheeda knew she needed to do: face the public. She had been silent long enough. Now it was time to tell her story in her own words. The interview was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon, a one-on-one special. It would air on a major network. Rasheeda arrived at the studio poised and composed, dressed in a sleek black outfit that radiated strength. She wasn't there to cry or to bash Kirk. She was there to speak her truth. The interviewer didn't waste time. "Rasheeda, let's start with the obvious." She said that footage. It broke the internet. It broke hearts. And it broke your marriage. What went through your mind the first time you saw it? Rasheeda exhaled slowly. Shock, then pain, and then clarity. Clarity, the interviewer asked. "Yes," she said, "because for years, I kept asking myself if I was overreacting, if maybe I was being too emotional, too sensitive. That footage was proof that I wasn't crazy. It was proof that my instincts were right all along. And that's when I knew I couldn't do it anymore." The interviewer nodded. "You've said before that this wasn't about cheating, that it was deeper than that. What did you mean by that?" "Cheating hurts," Rasheeda replied. "But betrayal is more than just physical. It's emotional. It's mental. When someone mocks you, when they look you in the eye and say they love you, then turn around and make fun of your loyalty, that's a level of disrespect you can't come back from. It wasn't just my heart that broke. It was my self-respect." The studio was silent as her words hung in the air. And now, the interviewer asked, "Where do you stand with Kirk today?" "There is no we," Rasheeda said firmly. "I wish him the best in life, but he's no longer part of mine." The interview went viral within hours of airings. Clips of Rasheeda's most powerful quotes flooded social media, and fans rallied around her once again. But this time, the narrative was different. She wasn't just a woman who had been betrayed. She was a symbol of strength, a blueprint for anyone trying to rebuild after devastation. Kirk watched the interview alone in his apartment, a place much smaller than the home they once shared. Every word she said cut deep. He knew he had no one to blame but himself. The woman he once mocked as too weak to leave had now become stronger without him than she ever was with him. Desperate, Kirk decided to make one final attempt. He penned a public apology, a long emotional post on social media, confessing his mistakes and begging for forgiveness. He admitted to disrespecting her, to taking her for granted, to breaking the trust that had taken years to build. But Rasheeda didn't respond. She didn't like, comment, or even acknowledge the post. Silence was her answer, and it was louder than any word she could have spoken. Meanwhile, Rasheeda was entering a new chapter. I focused entirely on herself. She launched a mentorship program for women recovering from betrayal and abuse. She hosted workshops on financial independence, self-worth, and healing. She even signed a book deal, a memoir detailing her journey titled Stronger Without You. And with each project, each appearance, and each new milestone, she felt a piece of her old self return. The fearless, ambitious, independent woman she had lost somewhere along the way. It wasn't that she no longer felt pain. It wasn't that she had forgotten the betrayal. It was that she had reclaimed the power she had once given away so freely. And in doing so, she discovered something profound. She didn't need closure from Kirk. She was the closure. One evening, as she stood on the balcony of her new penthouse, looking out over the city skyline, Rasheeda felt something she hadn't felt in years: peace. The betrayal that once consumed her was now just a memory. The tears that once felt daily had dried, and the woman who once whispered, "I can't believe this," was now saying something completely different. "I can't believe how far I've come." Time has a way of healing even the deepest wounds, not by erasing them, but by teaching you how to live with the scars. Months after the footage aired, after the divorce papers were filed, and after the world had watched her fall apart, Rasheeda was no longer the woman who had once sat sobbing on a reunion stage. She was stronger now, smarter, calmer, and above all, she was finally free. Her days were full but peaceful. Mornings started with coffee on the balcony instead of arguments. Business meetings were about expansion and creativity, not damage control. Nights were spent surrounded by friends, family, and laughter, not tears and explanations. For the first time in years, Rasheeda was living a life that belonged entirely to her. But even as the months turned into nearly a year, there were moments when memories crept in. She'd walk past a restaurant they used to visit, or hear a song they once danced to, and a wave of sadness would wash over her. But instead of breaking her, those moments reminded her of how far she had come. Because now those memories weren't painful. They were proof of everything she had survived. Her empire, once tied to Kirk's name, was thriving on its own. Her businesses had doubled in value. Her memoir, Stronger Without You, became a bestseller within weeks of release. And her mentorship program was changing lives, with hundreds of women writing to say her story gave them the courage to leave toxic relationships and rebuild. Rasheeda had turned her pain into purpose, and that was something no betrayal could ever take away. Meanwhile, Kirk's world had become a cautionary tale. The industry that once celebrated him had turned its back. He was no longer invited to events, no longer offered collaborations, and no longer seen as a power player. People whispered about how he'd fumbled the bag and lost the best thing that ever happened to him. Every mistake, every betrayal, every moment of arrogance had caught up to him, and it had cost him everything. One cold evening, Kirk reached out one last time. He asked to meet just to talk, he said. Against her better judgment, Rasheeda agreed. Closure wasn't something she needed anymore, but she was curious to see what this final chapter would look like face to face. They met at a quiet park, far away from cameras and gossip blogs. Kirk looked older, worn down, like a man carrying the weight of his own regret. He approached slowly, hands in his pockets, and for a moment they just stood there in silence. "You look good," he said softly. "I am good," Rasheeda replied, her voice calm and steady. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," he continued. "And I know an apology doesn't change anything, but I need to say it anyway. I'm sorry for all of it. For the cheating, for the lies, for the way I talked about you. I was wrong." Rasheeda nodded, but didn't speak. She had heard apologies before, too many in fact. But this time, they didn't sting or soothe. They were just words. "I lost everything," Kirk said, his voice breaking. "But losing you, that was the worst." "You didn't lose me," Rasheeda said softly. "You threw me away, half-flinched. Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" "I already have," she replied. The crowd erupted into applause. Tears filled eyes, and as Rasheeda looked out at the audience, she felt something she hadn't felt since long before the footage aired. Pride, not in the life she once had, but in the woman she had become. Some stories end in heartbreak, others end in silence. But Rasheeda's, it ended in power. The hidden footage that once shattered her world became the very thing that set her free. It exposed betrayal, yes, but more importantly, it exposed the strength she had forgotten she possessed. The tears that once fell in humiliation turned into fuel for her rebirth. And the woman who once whispered, "I can't believe this," now looks in the mirror and says, "I deserve everything I've dreamed of." This journey is more than reality. It's TV drama. It's a lesson for anyone who's ever been lied to, disrespected, or made to feel small. You are not defined by someone else's betrayal. You are not broken because someone failed to value you. You are stronger than they ever believed. And when you finally choose yourself, there is nothing you cannot rebuild. But this is only the beginning. In the world of love and hip-hop, Atlanta, secrets don't stay buried for long, and every ending leads to another explosive chapter. More drama is coming, more truths will surface. And the next betrayal, it might just change everything again. So don't stop here. Hit that subscribe button, turn on your notifications, okay, and get ready, because if you thought this story was powerful, the next one will leave you speechless. The real drama is just getting started, and you won't want to miss a single.